I never thought I'd be the guy posting here. You know, the one who suspects his wife's cheating and has to turn to strangers on the internet for advice. But here I am. I'm Alex, 34, and I've been married to Emily for 7 years. We've got 2 kids, Josh, who's 5, and Mia, who just turned 3. Life was pretty predictable, and honestly, I was okay with that. You get into a routine, you work, you come home, you spend time with the kids, and then rinse and repeat. But lately that routine got twisted into something I didn't expect. Emily started acting off. It wasn't anything huge at first, just small things. She started spending more time on her phone. We've always been pretty open with each other about what we're doing, who we're talking to, that kind of thing. But now, every time her phone buzzed, she'd glance at it and put it down face first, like she didn't want me seeing who it was. When I'd ask what was so funny, she'd just laugh and say, "Oh, it's nothing, just something from work." At first, I didn't think much of it. I'm not the type to get all jealous and controlling, but something about the way she brushed it off started to bother me. It was subtle, just a weird vibe that I couldn't shake. And then, other things started happening. She'd make excuses to work late. Emily's a marketing manager. And yeah, her job gets busy sometimes, but this was becoming a regular thing. 3-4 nights a week, she'd roll in after 10 p.m., saying she had meetings that ran late or had to finish a big project. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But sometimes, when she came home, I could smell this faint perfume on her. It wasn't the perfume she normally wore. It smelled sweeter, almost floral. At first, I figured it was someone at work, like maybe she was around a coworker who had sprayed too much, but it kept happening, and when I asked her about it, she got defensive. "You're being paranoid, Alex. Seriously, it's just work. Stop making it weird." I told myself she was right, that I was just being insecure or stressed out from work. I mean, she's my wife, right? We've got 2 kids together, a whole life. She wouldn't cheat. But things kept adding up in my head, and the more I tried to ignore it, the more it gnawed at me. The real turning point was about a month ago. It was a Friday night, and Emily said she had a late meeting with some clients. She promised she wouldn't be home too late, so I stayed up waiting for her. By midnight, she still wasn't back. I tried calling her, but it went straight to voicemail. My stomach was in knots. I stayed up until 2 a.m., just pacing the house, wondering where the hell she was. When she finally walked in, she looked shocked to see me still up. She said something about her phone dying and how the meeting went long, but something in her eyes didn't match her words. I felt like I was looking at a stranger. When I hugged her, there was that perfume again. Stronger this time. I asked her outright, "Where were you really?" She gave me that same line about work, but I could tell she was lying. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, and realized that I didn't know my own wife anymore. The woman sleeping next to me felt like a stranger, and I didn't know what to do about it. After that night, things really started to spiral. I couldn't stop thinking about where Emily had been. My mind kept racing. Was it really a work thing? Was she with someone else? I hated how paranoid I was feeling, but I also couldn't shake the idea that something was seriously wrong. So I did what anyone in my situation would do. I started paying more attention. The next week, she claimed she had another late night at work, but this time I decided to check. I called her office around 8 p.m., hoping to hear her pick up, maybe tell me she'd be home soon. Instead, the receptionist answered and told me that Emily had left hours ago. Hours. I hung up without saying much and just sat there, feeling like an idiot. What the hell was I supposed to do with that information? I could confront her, sure, but what if I was wrong? What if I came at her all accusatory and it turned out to be nothing? That would just make things worse. So, I did nothing, for a few days anyway, but I couldn't let it go. A couple of nights later, Emily had another one of her meetings. This time I decided to do something I'd never thought I'd do in a million years. I followed her. Yeah, I know how that sounds, but I had to know for sure. She left around 7, dressed a little too nicely for a late-night work meeting if you ask me. I waited about 10 minutes before heading out behind her. My heart was pounding in my chest the whole time, like I was the one doing something wrong. I didn't really have a plan, just hoped I wouldn't get caught. I followed her downtown, expecting her to pull up at her office or some restaurant for a business dinner or something. But she didn't. Instead, she parked in front of this fancy hotel. My stomach dropped. She didn't even hesitate, just got out of the car, glanced around like she was checking if anyone saw her, and walked right inside. At that point, my heart was racing, and I didn't know what to do. Do I go in? Do I wait? Do I just leave? I decided to wait in the car for a while, but my mind was screaming at me. After about 30 minutes, I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to know. I walked into the lobby, trying to act like I wasn't about to lose my mind. The woman at the front desk looked at me like she was waiting for me to say something, but I didn't. Instead, I just sat down in the waiting area, pretending to be on my phone, but watching the elevators out of the corner of my eye. I must have looked crazy, sitting there sweating and trying not to let my hands shake. It felt like forever, but maybe an hour later, I saw her. Emily. She stepped off the elevator, laughing, with some guy. He was tall, well-dressed, and had his arm around her like they'd been together forever. She didn't see me, thankfully. They just walked right past me and out the door, heading to his car. That moment, man, it felt like everything inside me shattered. There it was. Proof. She was cheating on me. I wanted to jump up, run out there, scream at her, at him, at the whole damn situation. But I didn't. I just sat there, watching them drive away, completely numb. I don't even know how long I stayed in that lobby. Eventually, I got up, went back to my car, and just drove home in silence. No music, no thinking, just nothing. It was like my brain shut down. When I got home, the kids were already asleep and the house was dark. I went to our bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed, waiting for her to come home. When she finally walked in, around 1 a.m., she didn't look the least bit guilty. She kicked off her heels, threw her bag on the floor, and didn't even look at me. I asked her how her meeting went, and she gave me the same bullshit excuse about it running late. She was good at lying. Too good. But now, I knew the truth. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. I lay there staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of everything. My wife, the woman I trusted more than anyone, was lying next to me, completely unaware that I knew her dirty secret. It was like a bad dream, but I couldn't wake up. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them, Emily and that guy, laughing, touching, acting like I didn't even exist. I couldn't bring myself to confront her. Not yet. I needed time to think, to figure out what the hell I was going to do. The next morning, I got up early, made breakfast for the kids, and acted like everything was normal. Emily came downstairs smiling, like she hadn't just come home from cheating on me hours before. She kissed me on the cheek, thanked me for making breakfast, and sat down with Josh and Mia like nothing was wrong. I watched her, wondering how she could be so calm, so fake. I wanted to scream at her, to blow everything up right there in the kitchen. But I didn't. Not with the kids around. Instead, I forced a smile and went through the motions of the day. For the next few days, I kept quiet, pretending I didn't know anything. It was torture. Every time she left the house, I wondered if she was going to see him. Every time her phone buzzed, I knew it was him texting her. I felt like I was losing my mind. I started watching her more closely, noticing little things I'd missed before. She'd giggle at her phone while she was cooking or step outside to take a call, always making sure I couldn't hear. One night, I was sitting on the couch, pretending to watch TV while she was on her phone again. She must have thought I was too distracted to notice, but I caught her smiling at the screen and quickly swiping away a message when I glanced over. That was it. I couldn't take it anymore. I asked her casually, "Who are you texting?" She froze for a second, her fingers tightening around her phone. Then she looked up, all fake and casual, and said, "Oh, just Liz from work. She's asking about the project we've been working on." Liz? Sure. I'd heard her use that excuse before. Something in me snapped. I couldn't hold back any longer. Really? Because I called your office last week and they said you left early. So unless Liz was asking about that project over drinks at a hotel, I'm not buying it. Her face went pale. She stared at me for a second, processing what I'd just said, and then, in typical Emily fashion, she tried to turn it around on me. Are you spying on me, Alex? What the hell? That's creepy. I can't believe you don't trust me. There it was, the gaslighting. She was trying to flip the whole thing and make me feel like the bad guy. I didn't let her. Don't even try that, Emily. I know what's going on. I know about the hotel. I know about the guy. Don't lie to me. She stared at me, eyes wide, and for a moment, I thought maybe she'd come clean. Maybe she'd finally admit it and we could at least stop pretending. But instead, she did what she always does. She lied. You're crazy, Alex. I don't know what you think you know, but you're wrong. There's no guy. It's all in your head. I wanted to scream, to shake her and make her admit it, but I just stood there feeling a mix of rage and disbelief. How could she stand there and look me in the eyes, lying to my face like that? I could feel my blood boiling, but I didn't want to lose control. Not yet. I saw you, Emily. I followed you to the hotel. I saw you with him. Stop lying. Her mouth opened and closed a few times like she was searching for the right words. I thought maybe, just maybe, she was finally going to come clean. But no. Instead, she doubled down. You followed me? What the hell is wrong with you? That's insane. I was at a work event, Alex. Jesus, you're acting like a psychopath. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She wasn't just denying it, she was making me out to be the villain. I took a deep breath, trying to keep it together, but the frustration was overwhelming. Stop it, Emily, just stop, I know. I've seen it. I don't need any more lies. She crossed her arms and glared at me like I was the one in the wrong. Fine. You want the truth, Alex? You really want to know? Yeah, I've been seeing someone. But guess what? It's because you're never around, you're always at work, you're always distracted, and I'm sick of feeling ignored. So, yeah, I found someone who actually pays attention to me. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I'd expected the affair, but I hadn't expected her to blame me for it. It was like she'd flipped the entire script, and now I was the bad guy. I stood there speechless as she kept going. You think you're so perfect? You're not. You barely notice me anymore. And this is on you, Alex. Maybe if you actually cared about me, I wouldn't have had to go find it somewhere else. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My hands were shaking, and all I could think about was how she was standing there, justifying everything like I was the one who'd pushed her into someone else's arms. I didn't say anything. I just turned and walked out of the room, my head spinning, my chest tight. I didn't know what the hell to do. I left the house that night, not even sure where I was going. I just needed to get out, to breathe, to clear my head from the madness Emily had dumped on me. The way she twisted everything. It made my blood boil. She actually blamed me for her cheating, for her lying. It felt like she'd just taken all those years of our marriage and thrown them right in my face, saying they weren't enough. I drove around for a while, no destination in mind. I thought about going to a bar and drowning myself in whiskey until I could forget the look on her face when she told me it was my fault. But I didn't. Instead, I found myself parked outside my brother Mike's house. He's always been the sensible one, the guy I could count on to talk me down when life got crazy. I knocked on his door, and when he opened it, the first thing he said was, "Jesus, man, you look like hell. What's going on?" I couldn't even speak. I just stood there staring at him, and the words finally spilled out. "She's cheating on me, Mike." He pulled me inside without a second thought. I hadn't told anyone about what I suspected before, but now that I'd seen it with my own eyes, there was no holding it in anymore. I needed to let it out before I exploded. I sat on his couch, my head in my hands, and told him everything. Mike listened, not interrupting, just letting me get it all off my chest. When I was done, he sat back, took a deep breath, and said, "Damn, Alex. That's rough, man, but you can't let her twist this on you. You didn't do this. She did. That's what I needed to hear." I was so wrapped up in her accusations, in her saying it was my fault, that I started questioning myself. But Mike was right. I hadn't cheated. I hadn't lied. I wasn't the one sneaking off to hotels. Still, part of me wondered if maybe I had pushed her away. Had I really been that distant? Had I not been paying attention? I looked up at him and said, "She told me it's because I'm not around enough, that I don't care about her. What if she's right, Mike? What if this is my fault?" Mike shook his head. "Don't do that to yourself, man. Look, I'm not saying things were perfect. No marriage is. But cheating? That's on her. She could have talked to you, told you what was bothering her, worked on it together. Instead, she went behind your back and made it worse. That's not your fault." He was right, but it still didn't make the pain go away. Knowing that the woman I'd built a life with, the mother of my kids, could betray me like this, it felt like I was being gutted. The anger was there too, but it was tangled up with this overwhelming sadness that made it hard to breathe. Mike handed me a beer and sat down next to me. "What are you going to do now?" That was the question I'd been avoiding. I hadn't thought about what came next because I didn't want to face it. I knew I couldn't stay in the house with her, not after what I'd seen, not after what she'd said. But the kids. Josh and Mia had no idea any of this was going on, and I couldn't just leave them. "I don't know," I admitted. "I don't know what the hell to do." Mike sighed. "Look, man, whatever you decide, you don't have to figure it all out right now. You can crash here for as long as you need, but you're going to have to confront her again, and this time you can't let her pull that 'it's your fault' crap. You've got to be clear about what you want." What did I want? A few days ago, I would have said I wanted my family, my marriage. I would have done anything to save it. But now, I wasn't sure. The love I had for her was still there, buried somewhere beneath the anger and betrayal, but I didn't know if I could ever trust her again. Every time I looked at her, I'd see her with him, laughing, kissing, lying to me like it was nothing. I spent the night at Mike's, tossing and turning on his couch, replaying the confrontation over and over in my head. Her words echoed in my mind. "This is on you." It was like she believed it. Like she honestly thought her actions were justified because I wasn't giving her enough attention. It made me sick. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I hadn't slept at all. My phone was buzzing with texts from Emily. I stared at the screen, feeling a wave of disgust. I didn't want to deal with her, but I knew I couldn't avoid it forever. "Alex, can we talk?" One of the messages read. "Please, just come home. We need to talk about this." I knew I had to go back, not because I wanted to, but because I needed to figure out what came next. For the kids, if nothing else. Mike offered to come with me, but I told him I needed to do it alone. When I walked into the house, Emily was sitting at the kitchen table, her face puffy and red, like she'd been crying all night. She looked up at me, her eyes wide and pleading. "Alex, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean what I said last night. I was angry and I was trying to justify it. But I know it's not your fault. Please, can we just talk?" I stood there staring at her, feeling numb. I didn't even know what to say. Part of me wanted to forgive her, to work through it for the sake of the kids. But the other part of me, the part that remembered seeing her walk out of that hotel with another man, was screaming at me to get out, to leave her and never look back. She reached out, trying to take my hand, but I pulled away. "We can talk," I said, my voice flat. "But I'm not sure there's anything left to say." Emily's face crumbled when I pulled away from her. I could see the guilt in her eyes, the regret, but it didn't matter. At that moment, I didn't feel anything for her. No love, no anger, nothing. Just emptiness. She stayed quiet for a while, like she was trying to figure out how to start. The tension between us was thick, and I could feel the weight of everything we weren't saying pressing down on my chest. Finally, she broke the silence. "Alex, I know what I did was wrong. I know I hurt you." Her voice cracked, and she looked down at her hands, fiddling with her wedding ring. "But I never stopped loving you. I swear, I never wanted this to happen. I almost laughed. She was sitting there saying she loved me after sneaking around with another man for God knows how long. How could she claim to love me while lying to my face, while betraying everything we built? I crossed my arms and leaned against the counter, keeping my distance. If you loved me, you wouldn't have done this, Emily. You wouldn't have lied, you wouldn't have snuck off to hotels, and you damn sure wouldn't have tried to blame me for it. She winced at that, but I didn't care. I needed her to understand that no apology was going to fix this. She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face now. I didn't know how to handle it. I felt alone. You were always so busy with work, and I felt like you didn't see me anymore. There it is again. I shook my head. You keep saying it like this is my fault. Like I pushed you into his arms because I had a job, because I couldn't be there every second. Do you even hear yourself? I'm not saying it's your fault, she cried. I'm just trying to explain what I was feeling. I was lost, Alex. And then I met him, and I don't know. It just happened. It just happened, I repeated, the words burning in my mouth. You didn't just happen to meet him in a hotel. You made choices, Emily. You chose to cheat, to lie, to destroy our family. You had a million chances to stop yourself, but you didn't. So don't sit there and act like it was out of your control. She started sobbing harder now, her whole body shaking. But I was too angry, too broken to feel anything but resentment. How long had this been going on? How many times had she come home to our kids, to me, after being with him? I didn't even know who she was anymore. Emily wiped her face with the back of her hand, her voice trembling as she spoke. I ended it, with him. I ended it the moment you confronted me. I swear, Alex, it's over. I don't want to lose you. I don't want to lose our family. That hit me hard. The thought of our kids, Josh and Mia, not having both parents under one roof was like a knife to the gut. I didn't want them to grow up in a broken home. But how could I stay? How could I look at Emily every day, knowing what she'd done? I sighed, running my hands through my hair, trying to think clearly. You've already destroyed our family, Emily. The moment you decided to cheat, it was over. You didn't just betray me, you betrayed them. I gestured toward the hallway, where the kids' rooms were. I'm sorry, she whispered, barely able to speak through her tears. I'll do anything to make this right. Please, Alex, we can fix this. We can go to therapy. We can work through it. Just don't give up on us. I wanted to believe her. God, part of me wanted to fix it. But I didn't know if I had the strength. And what happens next time? I asked, my voice steady but cold. What happens when you feel alone again? When you decide I'm not paying enough attention to you? Are you going to run off and find another guy? No! She shook her head frantically. No, I swear it was a mistake. I'll never do it again. I'll prove it to you. Just give me a chance. Please. I stared at her, searching her face for some sign that things could ever go back to the way they were. But all I saw was the same woman who had lied to me for months, the same woman who had tried to make me feel guilty for her choices. I don't know if I can do this, Emily. The words felt heavy as I said them. I don't know if I can ever trust you again. Her eyes filled with panic. She stood up and moved toward me, reaching out to grab my hand. Please, Alex, we can rebuild this. We can get through it. Think about the kids. They need both of us. I pulled my hand away, not ready to let her touch me. The kids are the only reason I'm still standing here right now, I said. But I can't make any promises. She nodded, her face a mix of hope and fear. I'll do anything. Just stay. Don't leave. I'm not leaving right now, I said, my voice flat. But don't think for a second that I've forgiven you. I need time. Emily nodded again, tears still streaming down her face. Take all the time you need. I'll wait. I'll do whatever it takes. I didn't respond. I turned and walked out of the kitchen, heading upstairs to the guest room. I couldn't sleep in the same bed as her, not after everything. I needed space to think, to figure out what the hell I was going to do. As I lay in the guest bed that night, I stared at the ceiling, my mind spinning with everything that had happened. I didn't know what the future looked like anymore. All I knew was that the life I thought I had, the marriage I thought was solid, was gone. I woke up in the guest room the next morning, groggy and disoriented, the weight of everything hitting me all over again. For a brief second, I thought maybe it had all been a bad dream, that none of it was real. But the moment I stepped out of the room and saw Emily sitting at the kitchen table, staring into her coffee like it held the answers to all her problems, I knew the nightmare wasn't going anywhere. I walked past her, avoiding eye contact. The kids were already up, watching cartoons in the living room. They didn't have a clue that anything was wrong, and I wanted to keep it that way for as long as possible. It killed me to think about how this was going to affect them. Josh was old enough to notice things changing, and Mia, she was still so little. I didn't want them to grow up in a broken home, but I couldn't pretend everything was fine just for their sake either. "Alex," Emily said quietly, standing up from the table. "We need to talk." I sighed, leaning against the counter. "About what, Emily? You've said everything already." "No, I haven't," she replied, her voice cracking. "We didn't really talk last night. I was trying to explain, but I didn't." "You didn't what, Emily?" I interrupted, my patience thinning. "Didn't finish blaming me for your affair? Didn't get to justify why you decided to blow up our marriage? What else is there to say?" She winced like I'd slapped her, but I didn't care. I was tired of her excuses. If she wanted to talk, then fine. I wasn't going to hold back. "I told you, it was a mistake," she said, her voice shaking. "I know that doesn't make it better, but it's the truth. I never wanted to hurt you, Alex." "Yeah? Well, you did," I shot back. "You didn't just hurt me, you destroyed our family. You took everything we had and threw it away for some guy. So excuse me if I'm not feeling very forgiving right now." She started to cry again, her hands trembling as she tried to compose herself. I know, and I'm so sorry. If I could take it back, I would. I don't know how it got this far." I shook my head, my frustration boiling over. "It didn't just get this far, Emily. You chose to do this. You chose to lie, to sneak around, to cheat. And you did it over and over again. This wasn't some accident." Her sobs grew louder, and I had to step away, pacing the kitchen to keep myself from exploding. I didn't want to yell. I didn't want the kids to hear. I was barely keeping it together as it was. "I know I messed up," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "But I love you, Alex. I never stopped loving you." I stopped pacing and turned to face her, shaking my head in disbelief. "You don't cheat on someone you love, Emily. That's not love. You betrayed me. You betrayed us." She was crying harder now, her whole body shaking as she tried to speak. "Please, I'll do anything. Therapy, counseling, whatever it takes. Just don't leave me. Don't give up on us." I didn't say anything for a long moment. My mind was racing, caught between anger, sadness, and the overwhelming urge to escape this whole mess. Part of me wanted to scream at her, to tell her we were done, that I couldn't do this anymore. But then I thought about Josh and Mia, about what a separation would do to them. The idea of them bouncing between two homes, their lives completely turned upside down, made me sick to my stomach. "I don't know if there's anything left to save," I said quietly, more to myself than to her. She took a step closer, her eyes wide and desperate. "There is, Alex. There is. Please just give me a chance. I'll prove it to you. I'll show you I can fix this." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But trust? Trust doesn't come back just because someone promises to be better. It's not that simple. And I didn't know if I had it in me to go through all the motions, to pretend like we could just slap a Band-Aid on this and move forward. But the kids, they were my world. I couldn't make any decisions without thinking about how it would affect them. So I gave her the only answer I had at that moment. "I'll stay in for now," I said, my voice strained. "But not for you. For the kids." Emily's face lit up with a glimmer of hope, but I quickly shut it down. Don't think this means I've forgiven you. I haven't. I don't know if I ever will, but I need time to figure out what the hell I'm going to do, and I need space." She nodded quickly, wiping her tears. "I understand. I'll give you all the space you need. I promise I'll prove to you that I can make this right." I didn't respond. I didn't have it in me to argue or reassure her. I just turned and headed back upstairs to the guest room. I needed to clear my head, to think about what this new normal was supposed to look like. For the next few days, we lived like strangers. I stayed in the guest room, and she stayed in our bed. I kept our conversations strictly about the kids, nothing else. She tried to give me space, but I could tell she was walking on eggshells around me, always waiting for me to snap. I didn't snap. I didn't really do anything. I just felt numb. The hardest part was pretending everything was fine in front of Josh and Mia. They were too young to understand what was happening, and I wasn't ready to tell them. So I played the part of the good dad, taking them to school, helping with homework, making them laugh whenever I could. But every time I looked at them, I felt this crushing weight of guilt. I felt like I was failing them. Emily, for her part, was trying. She was more attentive, more present with the kids, and she even suggested we all have a family night, just the four of us, like we used to. I agreed, if only to keep up the appearance that things were okay. But the truth was, I didn't know if things would ever be okay again. That night, after the kids were in bed, she approached me. "Alex," she said softly, "I've made an appointment for us with a marriage counselor. I know you said you need space, but I thought maybe this could help." I wanted to say no, to tell her there was no point, but I didn't. Instead, I just nodded. "We'll see." And that was the best I could give her. The next few days dragged on, each one blending into the next. I was living in this strange in-between where I hadn't left, but I wasn't really staying either. Emily and I barely spoke except when it was about the kids. We both went through the motions of pretending like life was normal, but under the surface, everything was fractured. It was like living in a house of cards, and at any moment the slightest breeze could bring it all crashing down. Then, the day of the marriage counseling appointment came. Emily was trying her best to act hopeful, but I could tell she was terrified I'd bail. And honestly, part of me wanted to. I almost canceled a dozen times that morning, but I figured I owed it to the kids to at least try. If I didn't, I'd always wonder if things could have been different. If maybe we could have salvaged something from the wreckage of our marriage. When we got to the counselor's office, the tension between us was suffocating. Emily kept fidgeting with her wedding ring, twisting it around her finger like she was trying to keep it from slipping off. I sat there, my arms crossed, staring at the clock. I didn't want to be there. I didn't want to go over every painful detail of what she'd done. But there I was, sitting in a therapist's office with the woman who had betrayed me, trying to fix something that felt irreparably broken. The counselor, Dr. Rhodes, was a middle-aged woman with a calm, patient demeanor. She welcomed us, had us sit down, and asked us to talk about what brought us there. For a moment, I just sat there in silence, waiting for Emily to start. I wanted her to explain, to tell the story of how we ended up in this mess. But she didn't. She just stared at the floor, biting her lip, waiting for me to say something. Finally, I took a deep breath and spoke. "We're here because Emily had an affair," I said flatly, feeling the weight of the words as they hung in the air. "And now I don't know if I can trust her again, or if I even want to." Emily flinched but didn't deny it. She knew better than to lie anymore. Instead, she started crying softly, and I felt the familiar mix of anger and exhaustion wash over me. I'd seen enough of her tears in the last few days to last a lifetime, and none of them made any of this easier. Dr. Rhodes nodded, her face sympathetic but neutral. "I see," she said softly. "Alex, it sounds like you're dealing with a lot of hurt and betrayal right now. Emily, can you tell me what led to the affair?" Emily wiped her eyes, sniffling as she tried to gather her thoughts. "I don't know," she whispered. "I was lonely. I felt like Alex didn't see me anymore, like I wasn't important to him. And I know that doesn't excuse what I did. It was selfish, and I regret it more than anything. But I don't know how I let it get that far. I could feel the frustration building up in my chest again. It wasn't just a one-time thing, Emily. You didn't let it get that far. You chose to keep going back, over and over. Don't sit here and act like you didn't know what you were doing. I know, she said quickly, her voice desperate. I know, Alex. I made a choice, and it was the wrong one. But I'm trying to make things right now. I'm trying to fix this. Dr. Rhodes turned to me. Alex, what do you need from Emily right now to even consider rebuilding trust? I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. What do I need? I don't even know. I don't think I can trust her again, no matter what she does. Every time I look at her, I see her with him. How the hell do I move past that? Dr. Rhodes didn't push me, which I appreciated. She just nodded thoughtfully. That's completely understandable. Trust is incredibly difficult to rebuild after betrayal. It's going to take a lot of time, and it's okay if you're not sure yet. But if you do decide to try, we'll need to set some boundaries and have open communication. Emily jumped in, her voice shaky. I'll do anything, Alex, whatever you need. I'll be completely open, no secrets, no lies. I'll go to counseling every week if that's what it takes. I stared at her, searching her face for any sign that things could be different, that she could actually follow through on all the promises she was making. But all I saw was someone desperate to keep her life from falling apart. And I couldn't shake the feeling that it was too little, too late. I don't know if I want to stay, I admitted, my voice low. I'm here because of the kids, but I don't know if I can do this for you. Emily's face crumbled at that, but she nodded slowly. I understand, she whispered. But I'm asking for one more chance. For them. For us. Dr. Rhodes gave us a moment of silence before she spoke again. Alex, it sounds like you're still weighing your options. That's okay. You don't have to make any decisions today. But Emily, if Alex decides to stay and work through this, it's important that you understand the gravity of what he's feeling. Trust is fragile, and it will take consistent effort on your part to rebuild it. Emily nodded, her face streaked with tears. I'll do it. I swear the session wrapped up after that, with Dr. Rhodes encouraging us to keep talking and to come back for another session. We walked out of the office in silence, the weight of everything still hanging between us. As we got into the car, Emily reached over to take my hand, but I pulled away. I couldn't do it. Not yet. The drive home was quiet, the tension almost unbearable. When we pulled into the driveway, the kids ran out to greet us, their faces lighting up like everything was normal. I forced a smile, hugging them tight, and for a moment, I pretended that maybe we could get back to that normal someday. But as we tucked them into bed later that night, the reality of the situation hit me again. The home we had, the life we had, it wasn't coming back. Even if we stayed together, even if we went through the counseling and tried to fix things, nothing would ever be the same. I went back to the guest room, closing the door behind me, and lay down on the bed. I didn't know what to do. Staying felt impossible. But leaving? Leaving meant tearing everything apart, not just for me and Emily, but for Josh and Mia too. And I wasn't ready to make that call. So for now, I was stuck in limbo, waiting, wondering, and hoping that somehow I'd figure out what the hell I was supposed to do next. The next few days were more of the same. Tense silences, awkward small talk in front of the kids, and me retreating to the guest room at night. It was like we were playing house, trying to pretend like everything was okay, when in reality, nothing was. I was exhausted, mentally, emotionally, physically. Emily kept her distance, trying not to push me. She'd ask me how I was doing, and I'd just give her one-word answers. She still made dinner, did laundry, played with the kids, and acted like the perfect mom. But every time I looked at her, all I could see was her with that guy. The betrayal, the lies, it was always there, just under the surface. One night, after the kids were in bed, Emily knocked on the door of the guest room. I was sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor, trying to figure out how the hell my life had turned into this mess. "Can I come in?" she asked softly. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to tell her to leave me alone, but another part of me knew we couldn't keep avoiding each other forever. "Yeah, come in." She opened the door slowly, stepping in like she was afraid I'd snap at her. She sat down on the chair in the corner, folding her hands in her lap. "I've been thinking about everything. About us." I didn't respond, just stared at the floor, waiting for whatever she had to say next. "I know you don't want to hear this, but I can't just sit around pretending like nothing happened," she continued. "I've been trying to give you space, trying to let you process everything, but we can't keep living like this." I looked up at her, feeling that familiar wave of frustration. "What do you want me to do, Emily? I can't just flip a switch and act like everything's fine." "I'm not asking you to," she said quickly. "I know things aren't fine. I know I hurt you more than I can ever take back, but we have to figure out a way to move forward, whether that's together or apart." Her voice cracked on that last word, and for the first time I realized she was genuinely scared I might leave. She wasn't just trying to save face anymore, she was terrified. And as much as I wanted to be the strong one, to tell her I'd made up my mind, I couldn't, because I hadn't made up my mind. I was stuck, not knowing which path to take. "I don't know what you want from me," I said finally. "One day I think we should try to make it work. The next, I can't even stand to look at you." She nodded slowly, tears welling up in her eyes. "I know. And I get it, Alex, I do. I can't imagine how much pain you're in because of me. I need to know if there's even a chance, if there's something to fight for." The question hung in the air, and I didn't have an answer. I'd been going back and forth on it for days, weighing the pros and cons, trying to figure out if staying was worth it, but nothing seemed clear. How do you forgive something like this? How do you rebuild trust with someone who destroyed it? "I don't know," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I can trust you again." She wiped at her eyes, sniffling. "I'm willing to do whatever it takes. Counseling, transparency, whatever you need. I'll fight for us, Alex, but I need to know if you're willing to even try." There it was, the million-dollar question. Was I willing to try? Was I willing to put in the effort to rebuild a marriage that had been shattered by lies and betrayal? And even if I was, would it be enough? "I don't know if I'm ready to make that decision," I said, my chest tight. "I just need more time." She nodded again, her tears now flowing freely. "Okay, take all the time you need. I'll wait. I'll be here doing everything I can to show you that I'm serious about fixing this. But I'll understand if you decide you can't." We sat there in silence for a while, the weight of everything pressing down on us. I wanted to say something comforting, something to make her feel better, but I couldn't. I didn't have it in me. Finally, she stood up, her movements slow and hesitant. "Good night, Alex," she whispered before slipping out of the room. After she left, I lay back on the bed, staring up at the ceiling. I thought about everything she'd said, everything we'd been through in the last few days. I knew she was sorry. I knew she regretted what she'd done, but regret wasn't enough to erase the hurt, to rebuild the trust that had been shattered. I stayed up late that night, thinking about our past, the good times, and wondering if we could ever get back to that place. The answer never came. The next day I went to work, trying to distract myself, but my mind kept drifting back to her, to us. By the time I got home, the kids were playing in the living room, and Emily was in the kitchen making dinner like she always did. She smiled when she saw me, but it was tentative, like she wasn't sure if I was going to snap or not. I went through the motions, helping the kids with their homework, sitting down for dinner, but inside I was still torn. Emily was trying. She was going out of her way to show me that she was committed to making things right. But no matter how hard she tried, the doubt lingered. That night, as I was getting ready to retreat to the guest room again, Emily stopped me in the hallway. "Alex," she said softly, "I made a list." I raised an eyebrow. "A list?" She handed me a piece of paper, her hands trembling. "Of all the things I want to do to make this work, to earn your trust again. It's not much, but I wanted you to know that I'm serious." I unfolded the paper, glancing at it. There were bullet points, things like counseling, open phone access, scheduled date nights, even moving to a new house if that would help us start fresh. It was all there in her handwriting, a desperate attempt to show me she was willing to do whatever it took. But looking at that list didn't fill me with hope. If anything, it made me feel even more trapped, like this was some kind of performance, a checklist we had to tick off to pretend like everything was fixable. "I don't know if a list can fix this, Emily," I said quietly. She nodded, her eyes sad but determined. "I know, but I want you to know I'm all in. I'll do anything. Just don't give up on us yet." I sighed, folding the paper back up and handing it to her. "We'll see." The list haunted me for the next few days. It was like Emily had reduced our entire marriage to a checklist of fixes. Counseling? Sure. Open access to her phone? Fine. But how do you fix betrayal? How do you fix the gut-wrenching feeling of picturing your wife with someone else, laughing, kissing, pretending you don't exist? I still wasn't sleeping well, and every night in the guest room felt like an endless stretch of time where I was left alone with my thoughts. Thoughts I couldn't quiet. The anger, the sadness, it kept looping over and over again. I'd get up, go to work, come home and pretend for the kids, but inside, I was stuck in the same place. And that place was dark. One evening, after another long day at work, I came home to find Emily sitting on the couch, a glass of wine in her hand. The kids were asleep, the house was quiet, and she looked more composed than I'd seen her in weeks. When I walked in, she didn't say anything at first. She just gestured for me to sit down. "I've been thinking a lot," she said, her voice calm but heavy with emotion. "About us, about everything." I sat down across from her, bracing myself for whatever was coming. I didn't know if I had the energy to keep doing this, these constant talks that never seemed to lead anywhere. I realized that I've been asking you to stay, asking you to forgive me, but I haven't really given you the space you need to figure out what you want," she continued. "I've been so focused on saving this marriage that I haven't stopped to think about what you're going through." I didn't know where she was going with this, but I let her speak. "So, I've decided to go stay with my sister for a while," she said quietly. "I'll take the kids with me so you can have some time to yourself. I think it's what we both need." For a moment, I didn't know how to respond. The idea of being alone in the house without the kids, without Emily, was both a relief and a punch to the gut. But I also knew she was right. We couldn't keep circling each other like this, pretending to fix something that was still so broken. "When?" I asked. "Tomorrow," she said. "I've already talked to my sister. We'll stay there for a few weeks, maybe longer if you need it." I nodded slowly, trying to process what this meant. Part of me was grateful. I needed the space. I needed time to think without constantly feeling the pressure of her eyes on me, waiting for me to make a decision. But the other part of me felt like I was about to lose something, even though I wasn't sure I wanted it anymore. "What about the kids?" I asked. "I don't want them thinking—" "I'll explain it to them," she interrupted. "I'll tell them we're just visiting Aunt Karen for a little while. They won't know anything's wrong." I nodded again, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on my chest. "Okay." We sat in silence for a while after that, neither of us knowing what else to say. I wanted to feel something, relief, anger, sadness, but all I felt was exhaustion. The next morning, I watched as she packed the kids' bags. Josh was excited, babbling on about how much fun it would be to see Aunt Karen, and Mia was just happy to go anywhere with her brother. Emily avoided eye contact with me the entire time, and I knew she was holding it together for the kids' sake. When it was time to leave, Josh ran over to me and hugged my legs. "We'll be back soon, Daddy. Don't miss us too much." I forced a smile and ruffled his hair. I won't, buddy. You guys have fun. Emily stood by the door, Mia in her arms, her face tight with emotion. We'll call you every night, she said softly. I nodded, not trusting myself to say much more. And then, they were gone. The house felt unnaturally quiet without them, like all the life had been sucked out of it. I sat on the couch, staring at the empty space where they'd been just a few minutes before, and for the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of everything. The silence gave me space to think, but it didn't bring clarity. It didn't bring the answers I was hoping for. All it did was force me to confront the reality that I wasn't sure I wanted this marriage anymore. I wasn't sure I wanted to live in this constant state of distrust, waiting for the other shoe to drop. I knew Emily was trying, but sometimes trying isn't enough. That night, I lay in bed, our bed, not the guest room, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe. The confusion, the anger, it was all still there, but without the pressure of pretending, it felt a little less suffocating. I didn't know what I was going to do next, but I knew that for the first time in weeks, I wasn't drowning. The weeks passed in a blur. Emily stayed at her sister's, calling every night so the kids could talk to me. But the conversations with her were short, polite. We didn't talk about us. We didn't talk about what would happen when they came back. With the space, I started to realize something. The anger I had felt, the constant burning anger, it had started to fade. But with it went something else, the desire to fix things. One night, after talking with the kids, I sat down and stared at the framed family photo on the wall. We looked so happy in that picture, like everything was perfect. But I knew now that perfection was long gone. I picked up the phone and called Emily. She answered quickly, her voice hopeful, like maybe this was the call where I'd say I was ready to try again. Emily, I said, my voice steady but firm. I think we need to end this. For good. There was silence on the other end, followed by a shaky breath. Are you sure? I nodded even though she couldn't see me. Yeah, I've had time to think, and I can't keep pretending this can be fixed. She didn't argue. Maybe she knew it too. Okay, she whispered. And just like that, it was over. No dramatic fight, no pleading, just the quiet acceptance that our marriage was something neither of us could salvage anymore. When I hung up, I felt a strange sense of peace. It hurt, of course it did, but I knew it was the right decision. Sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes the damage is just too deep. The next morning, I packed up the rest of her things and sent them to her sisters. I was ready to move on, to start over. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't looking back.